Wait.
Through self-monitoring. Wait.
Okay, start now.
Okay. The study that Eastern Standard Group 2 recreated is called Increasing Physical Activity Through Self-Monitoring, Goal Setting, and Feedback. The group members were myself, Sarah Preston, Alyssa Rafith, Caroline Buell, Natalie Slimak, Betsy Garter, and Monica Ruffin. During this presentation, we will discuss the purpose of the study, the supporting literature, the methods, results, limitations, and conclusions. We will start with the purpose of the study. There were two purposes of this study. The first was to focus on the number of steps taken per day, and the second was to gain a better understanding of whether or not specific interventions increase physical activity. For the first purpose, we use a multiple baseline and reversal design. A multiple baseline and reversal design is when the original baseline is taken, treatment is then applied, baseline is retaken, and finally treatment is applied again. The specific interventions used were goal setting, self-monitoring, and feedback. In order to set a goal used in the treatment phases, the experimenter took an average of baseline steps and informed participants of their goal. The participants self-monitored their steps when treatment was applied. During the baseline phases, the participants were not allowed to look at the amount of steps taken. In this case, the experimenter received and recorded the amount of steps each participant had. The feedback was provided when the participant reached their daily step goal. If the goal was not met, the experimenter did not provide feedback. If the goal was met, the experimenter provided reinforcement and encouragement. Okay, so for this slide, we all discussed why we chose this study. For myself, I chose it because I wondered if wearing a tracking device and receiving outside reinforcement would actually help me be more active during the day. This study gave me a reason to try to increase my daily steps. For Alyssa, she wanted to replicate this study to increase her daily steps. She wanted to see if being more aware of her daily steps would motivate her to work out or walk more places. Caroline chose this study because she had never worn a Fitbit before, and she wanted to see if positive reinforcement and self-monitoring would increase her daily physical activity. Betsy chose this study because it seemed like it was one that we could all replicate while also gaining a better understanding of what may help or not help all of us achieve a more active lifestyle. Natalie chose this study because she was interested in becoming more active throughout the day. She felt wearing a device such as the Fitbit would potentially help her to become more aware of her activity level and become more motivated to increase that level. Monica wanted to become more active and felt that using a Fitbit, sorry, I can't see the bottom of that, with positive reinforcement would be an easy way to get started. The next part that we are going to talk about is the supporting literature, and Caroline Buell will actually be discussing the supporting literature.
Hi, I'm Caroline Buell, and I did the supporting literature of this study, so I am going to start by talking about the study that we replicated, and then I'm going to talk about 2 other sources that we found. In my report, I found 5 other sources, so I'm just going to give you a glimpse into it. So the study that we replicated was conducted by Normand in 2008. The purpose of this study was implemented to increase physical activity of adults through self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback. The design of this study was a combination of a multiple baseline and an AB-AB reversal design, and was used to evaluate the effects of intervention and the number of steps taken by each participant. The participants included 4 healthy adults, 3 males, and 1 female, who were between the ages of 39 and 50. In the baseline section of the study, the participants were to wear the pedometer, which was a New Lifestyles TM2000 pedometer, covered for 7 days of the baseline with tape. Once the baseline was complete, the experimenter would meet with each participant and record their number of baseline steps to set their average goal for the first week. Goals were calculated by taking the average of the first week of baseline. During the first intervention phase, the participants would wear their pedometer unmasked and track their daily steps for the next 7 days. If the participant met their daily goal, they would receive praise from the experimenter via email and weekly face-to-face meetings. If the participant had not reached their daily step goal, the experimenter would respond with a statement of encouragement, such as, "Keep it up, you can do a little bit better tomorrow, try a little harder." At the end of the week, if the participant had met their daily goal 4 out of 7 days, they would then increase their goal to that weekly average. After the 2 weeks of treatment, the design reverted back to baseline, where the pedometers were masked for 7 days, and the experiment would repeat the exact process as the first baseline phase. Once the participants had their new goals for the second treatment phase, they unmasked their pedometers and continued tracking their daily steps and sending them to the experimenter. Results of this study indicated that there was an increase following the introduction of the intervention. However, during baseline phases, the participants decreased their steps without the ability to self-monitor. There was high variability between each participant, and there was a lack of correspondence to the participants' daily goals. Now I'm going to talk about some other supporting literature that I found through Ball State's library database. These studies were conducted similarly to the previously discussed study. One study completed by Thomas D. Reddick, Brian C. Focht, and Jenna S. King in 2010 observed the effects of student-led pedometer intervention, and the purpose of this study was to evaluate the effectiveness of the student-led physical activity intervention that incorporated pedometers and cognitive behavioral strategies. Participants in the cognitive behavioral intervention condition received weekly mentoring from students on strategies to foster self-regulation, compared to the control condition, which participants simply tracked their steps and counted self-monitoring. The participants included 117 male and female adult volunteers, which were 70 women mass index. The study was conducted over a 6-week period, and the intervention group received a pedometer plus cognitive behavioral intervention, and the control group just had their pedometers. In the intervention group, each participant had a walking mentor who they met with weekly and discussed cognitive behavioral strategies that the participants could use to increase their step counts. The intervention condition group reported to have higher physical activity, which was defined as a step count, than those in the control condition. Over the course of the 6 weeks in the control group stayed in the average range between 7,000 to 8,000 steps per day, whereas the intervention condition began their average steps at 7,000 and increased to an average of 10,000 steps by the 6th week. The second study that I'm going to discuss, well, the second supporting literature I'm discussing, was conducted by Zizi, Vitulu, Rai, O'Hara, Tompkins, et al. In 2006. This study was conducted to analyze daily step count and physical activity in high school students. The purpose of this study was to measure the impacts of pedometers on daily step count and the perception of physical activity in high school students. The participants included 165 students who were randomly assigned to a pedometer-only group or a pedometer plus goal-setting group. The study was 3 weeks long, and the participants reported their steps on a daily basis. The students used a quasi-experimental repeated measures research design. The students wore their pedometers at school for 3 weeks. To keep track of their steps, the students were given a log to write in their steps each week. The goal group received informative handouts each week on goal setting, step guidelines, barriers, caloric expenditure while walking. The no-goal group did not receive the guideline information until the end of the study. Findings from this study suggested that there was no increase in steps per day. However, 70% of the participants did report that using pedometers positively impacted their awareness or motivation towards health and physical activity. In conclusion, the findings of these studies had inconsistent results. During the intervention phases, daily step totals increased, whereas during baseline and condition phases, participants did not have an upward trend for their daily step total. In order to have an increase in daily step totals, participants must have some way of self-monitoring and also have another independent person monitoring their daily step totals. If there is no reinforcer, the behavior will not increase. Reports from most of the studies showed an increase in interest about healthy lifestyles and increased awareness about exercise. And that is mine about the supporting literature.
Okay. Next, we will talk about the methods section, and that will be presented by Alyssa Rafith.
Hi, Hi, I'm Alyssa. I'll be discussing the method section. So at first, we wanted to talk about the participants that were in both studies. The replication of this study had similar participants to the original study. The original study used 4 healthy adults who all stated that they would exercise on a regular or semi-regular basis. Their ages ranged from 39 to 59 years old. Whereas our study that we replicated, we had 5 healthy adults who also exercised on a regular or semi-regular basis, ages ranging from 23 to 34 years old. And that we created off of the original study as well as replication that the participants to increase activity that resulted in a weight on the step tracker to prevent adult weight gain. Thank you. The materials that we used were very similar to the materials from the original study. To replicate this study were a step tracking device, which we used a Fitbit, tape, text messaging, an Excel spreadsheet, access to email. The step tracking device was used daily to monitor and record the steps taken. The tape was only utilized during the baseline procedure to prevent the participant from self-monitoring how many steps were taken. In order to communicate with the experimenter, these steps were sent to the experimenter. During baseline, participants had a novel person send a picture of their steps to the experimenter in order for them to not self-monitor. The Excel spreadsheet was used during treatment phases. Both the participant and the experimenter separately recorded the amount of steps that were taken and sent. At the end of each treatment phase, the experimenter and participant would exchange the spreadsheets via email to compare and confirm the amount of steps being recorded was accurate. Are examples of things that were sent back and forth between the participants and the experimenter. The first picture is an example of a screenshot that shows the amount of steps that were recorded from one participant. The second picture is a screenshot of a text message that was sent to the experimenter, as well as an additional participant that ensured that the steps are being sent and also reinforced each day. As you can see, where it says the verification that steps are being sent, the additional participant person saying, okay, I got the message, it's sent, or anything along the lines of informing the experimenter and the participant that the messages were received. The next message below it is just an example of the reinforcement that was sent from the experimenter to the participant. The inter-observer agreement used during this study was the number of agreements divided by the number of disagreements times 100 to yield a percentage. Each participant sent their daily steps to the experimenter to ensure that the steps were being received. Both the experimenter and the participant had to keep an Excel spreadsheet to record the steps. At the end of each phase, the spreadsheets were compared to ensure accuracy. Each participant recorded a 100% inter-observer agreement throughout the completion of the study. The following is an example of the email communication that was sent between the experimenter and the participant, verifying the recorded steps. The first chart was sent by the experimenter of an example of the chart that she recorded for the day 1 through 10 steps that she collected. The second chart was originally sent to the experimenter to indicate the steps that the participant recorded for days 1 through 10 of the experiment. For the replication of our study, we had 10 days of original baseline, 10 days for treatment, 5 days for rebaseline, and 10 days for treatment. Every day during these phases, the participants wore a Fitbit for 12 consecutive hours. Each participant selected their own 12 hours but kept the same time frame throughout the day. At the end of the 12 hours is when the pictures were sent to the experimenter. This part of the study varied from the original study. The original study did not indicate a time frame that the step trackers were worn. In order to keep data consistent throughout all participants, we selected a time frame that would work for everybody involved in the study.
Okay, our next topic is going to be the results of the study, and that is going to be presented by Betsy Gardner.
All right, yeah, this evening I will be discussing the results of our study. I'm going to be going through the results of each participant and highlighting certain trends that can be seen within their data, the overall results as well. The first participant I would like to discuss is Natalie. As previously mentioned, we use an A-B-A-B method, which you can see on our graph of the study. As you can see on Natalie's graph, there does seem to be a slight increase in her steps during the intervention phases as opposed to the baseline phases. Her data does fluctuate some, but there seem to be more days where she is steadily near or above her goal line in the intervention phase when compared to the baseline phases where she does drop below that goal line. Natalie had an average goal of 8,500 steps per day. Her goals were actually set on weekdays and 6,000 steps on weekends per day, out to approximately 8,500 steps per day throughout the week. This goal for both sections of her treatment, according to the data, she did hit that goal within both sessions of the treatment. We can also see an increase in her average steps per day during the treatment phase as compared to the baseline phases. And we see that in both intervention in baseline 1 to treatment 1, we had an increase, and baseline 2 to treatment 2, we had an increase in steps. So for Natalie, this experiment did seem to be rather successful. However, our study pool is slightly larger and we need to analyze all the data to determine if there is a functional relation between the intervention and steps per day. So next, we will look at Alyssa. Seemed to have similar results during the first phase of treatment as the first phase of baseline. You'll see quite a bit of fluctuation. And interestingly enough, her second phase of baseline looks much higher in her steps per day. And again, during the second phase of intervention, it drops down closer to her goal line during the second treatment phase. Alyssa's goal for both phases of intervention was 10,000 steps per day. Treatment was not successful during both phases. As you can see, her average steps per day decreased compared to her. She started out at 8,000.9. She dropped down to 140.7. Phase 2, her baseline was at 11,800.6, and her treatment dropped down to an average of 10,059. This may have something to do with the goals she had set for herself, because although her steps didn't increase during treatment as compared to intervention, during the second phase. So it is possible that a higher goal could have encouraged her to take more steps per day. Of Sarah's results. When we look at this graph, we can see that there is definitely an upward trend in her steps per day during the first phase of and then during the second phase, she doesn't show as much of an upward trend, but she does land right around her goal line. Sarah's initial goal was 10,000, which she later dropped to 9,000 during the second phase of intervention. Increase in her average steps per day in phase 1, starting from 7,787 line, going up to 11,274.2. But then we see during the second phase, even though she decreased her goal from 10,000 to 9,000, we still saw a decrease steps starting at 8,000 and decreasing to an average of 8,351.8. we will look at Caroline's results. Here on this graph that we have some fluctuating during the first phase of intervention, slightly more consistency during the second phase, landing her right around that goal line a bit more. Caroline's goals changed as well, but she actually increased her goal the second phase during the second phase as compared to the other participants who decreased their goals. Her initial goal was 9,270, and it was later increased to 10,000. Increase in her steps per day in both phases of intervention as compared to the baseline. However, she didn't hit her goal. Fluctuating during both her treatment phases as well as her second phase of baseline. She in that she did hit phase. As you can see, Monica during baseline 1 of 60, and that increased to 6,644.7. She then decreased her goal and was still able to increase, going from an average of 7,022 during baseline and 192.1, not only increasing her steps, but allowing her to hit that. So according to all the data we collected throughout the study, we do see that the majority of participants experienced increases in steps per day than during baseline, and all participants had an increased average steps per day during the first phase. Participants who saw a decreased average phase of intervention. That there was not a significant change in the range of steps per day for the participants because of the high levels of variability throughout both baseline and treatment phases. Based on these findings, the results do not show enough significance to claim that using self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback will increase one's steps per day.
Now we will discuss the limitations of the study. Monica Ruffin will be discussing these limitations.
Hi, I'm Monica, and I will be presenting the limitations to the research study. The limitation to the study included lack of treatment control, self-reporting data, duration of the study, sample size, and bias within the sample. Although the sample was intended to see if wearing a pedometer and self-reporting could be a tool to increase physical activity, a limitation of our study is a lack of treatment control that showed effective data change. For our study, we had each participant complete a brief questionnaire which asks the following questions. What is your age? How often do you exercise? Indicate if you are a healthy adult. To make the research more effective, we could have had each member complete a more in-depth screening, which may have included filling out a more intensive questionnaire, had other screenings such as glucose and cholesterol completed, and or body mass index calculated. Health screening testing would have given a more accurate account of our overall physical well-being and increase in physical activity before we started the intervention. This intervention would have given us more in-depth information about our overall health and possible goals, and if we achieve them. For the research, we thought it was necessary to determine if a pedometer was useful and more cost-effective before implementing a study that would require more costly materials and invasive procedures to be done, like the ones mentioned previously. Future studies should be designed to look at the specific physiological effects that the use of a pedometer may have on one's personal physical activity level. For instance, not only doing the health screening before the intervention, but after the intervention as well, to aid in determining the effectiveness of the pedometer in the study. The self-reported data was another limitation to the study. When having participants self-report, you can run into different problems. One problem is the fact that it rarely can be independently proven. In other words, you have to take what people say, whether in interviews, focus groups, or questionnaires as accurate. For this study, we not only had the participants self-report, but we had each individual send actual pictures of their Fitbit steps each day to ensure accuracy. Another limitation was the duration of the study. The study was conducted over a period of 5 weeks, which was not enough time to see long-term health results. It is important to make sure your study duration is long enough to be able to see if your target goal could in fact be achieved. Future studies should investigate the impact of wearing a pedometer for a longer period of time. Additionally, another limitation was the small sample size. Due to it only being 5 members in our group, the sample size could be considered too small. If your sample size is too small, it will be difficult to find a significant connection from research and the data. A larger sample size guarantees a representative of the population and more diversity that can be included, so where results can be generalized or transferred. Lastly, there was a bias within the treatment sample, which served as a limitation. This limitation we do not have control over due to the results presented are limited to just women due to our group being made up of all female participants. Therefore, the impact of the pedometer for males was not determined for this study. Future studies should include a larger sample size that utilize a more diverse population and include both males and females for better internal validity.
Lastly, we will go over the conclusion of the experiment. Natalie Slimak will go over the conclusion.
All right. Hi, I'm Natalie, and I'll just be going over the conclusion with you guys. Just to review, the main purpose of this intervention was for all 5 participants to increase the number of steps taken per day through goal setting, self-monitoring using a Fitbit device, and feedback from another group member. During the first phase of intervention, the 5 participants' average amount of steps increased. However, during the second phase of the intervention, 2 participants' average amount of steps decreased. Although some participants saw some increase in their amount of steps, the overall lack of increase of steps and uniformity of results across participants indicate that the methods used are an ineffective way to increase steps taken per day. A few alterations to the intervention that may have produced better results are that some participants, or I'll just go over some of the alterations. So some of the participants reported that they felt using the Fitbit device to self-monitor their steps helped them to increase their steps. However, some participants also reported that the feedback did not help them to take more steps each day. So the lack of increase in steps taken could be due to the form of reinforcement used. Positive reinforcement through social praise. This form of reinforcement may not have been a strong enough reinforcer, and the variable schedule of reinforcement may have been too thin. Other forms of positive reinforcement, such as receiving tangible items and on a denser schedule of reinforcement, may have potentially produced better results for the participants. Another alteration to the intervention that may have produced better results would have been for participants to update and calculate their goals more frequently. Some of the limitations mentioned that could have affected our results were the short duration of the study, lack of treatment control, and having a small population that lacked diversity. One suggestion for future research would be to use a different form of reinforcement to see what effects goal setting and self-monitoring may have on increasing frequency of exercise. And lastly, another suggestion would be to have adequate durations of baseline and treatment phases. And that's it.
So that concludes the study.
All right. I actually was really interested in seeing this because I think about 4 groups have picked this study to replicate. And to be honest, when I was even looking at the graphs of the different participants, I'm like a little bit confused by the study itself. with how they set their goals. And I think that that perhaps might be one of the most problematic things about this study is that it seems as though even the first goals are set based on the baseline levels of the participants' performance. And when you do that, you're not going to expect there to be really an increase in the intervention phase because you're basing it off of the average baseline performance that each of the participants had. And so for a number of these studies, and what's tricky too is that you have short phases. So even if it were to go up, you're not going to really expect much of a change from your baseline level because the goals that's being set is what you're already doing without any sort of intervention in place. So the one thing I really am curious to see is if other folks get similar results and outcomes. And because I think that they might, that it's just not going to be very effective. And I'd like to know, perhaps not into this too much, like in terms of the goal setting piece, as well as any other components in the intervention. You did talk a little bit about the other possible reinforcers. What could have made the study a little bit more effective? So just if anybody can answer some of those questions.
I think personally for me, it would have been more effective if my goal was higher than just what my average was because, I mean, I go to work and I come home and I do schoolwork. Like, I mean, I'm on a routine schedule and I really needed something to more motivate me to do something extra. So the average was just basically what I do every day. Didn't really give me anything to do extra.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that the average then of what your week was, it seems though was this for your previous week was your goal for the next week.
Yeah.
So it didn't go up.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many of these folks are going to be very successful unless you're just, your self-monitoring alone is enough to have your average go up.
Right, which I think that is dependent on the type of person you are, more so anything to do with the study.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you had if you had your goals be higher, what do you guys think would have been the best way to set those goals? Because you'll see a lot of different exercise studies here and they're set in different ways. Sometimes they're set by the participants themselves, or sometimes they're set by like a predetermined criteria or like just a gradual step increase. So what do you think would have been most effective for you guys?
For me, I think maybe if the experimenter kind of took my average and then increased it by 1,000 or 2,000 and said, hey, here's your goal for the week. Try to, meet your goal or exceed your goal. I think that would have helped for me instead of me just saying, I kind of think 10,000 will work this week.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else on that one?
I agree with her because when I was given the opportunity to decrease my step goal, I did. And then I started reaching it. So that's the reason why for me, I showed more increase because I'm like, that's not really working for me. Let's try something like about here. And so I think it would have been more motivating if someone was telling me like, okay, this week, this is what it is. And then that week and gradually increasing it versus just saying, hey, come up with an average for yourself and then come up with a goal. So I think that would have been more beneficial for me.
Interesting to get the feedback from students on that, because some folks who were in a group where they were able to set their own goals, they'd say, oh, I way prefer doing that than have somebody else set them for me. But then if you also see what the goals were that they set for themselves, sometimes it was very, it was very minor increases. Mm-hmm. And so you have to kind of wonder if somebody else is setting them, if you'll push yourself a little bit harder. And so that was interesting. Kind of just what different people's preferences are. And then the other thing I wanted to know, did you guys give each other graphical feedback too, or was that already embedded in with the Fitbit because it was kind of tracking with a graph?
It was embedded within the Fitbit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So you guys didn't actually have to provide that as feedback. And can you just I know you guys did share one like example, but what were some of the types of statements that you guys would give each other for the reinforcement piece?
So Betsy would be the one that would text us with the reinforcement because we would send it to Betsy, and then we also send it to Monica at the same time. And if our goal, their daily step goal increased, the reinforcement we would receive are either like emojis, like, or you can do it, wow, awesome, you had a great day, keep it up, you can do even better tomorrow. So just praise.
Okay. And so and you guys had like the one designated like experimenter who gave the feedback to everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. And then did that experimenter participate too or not? Did they just
No.
Okay. And
No.
you guys may have emailed me about this, but I also have 4 groups who did this study, so I just want to make sure. What was the rationale again for not doing the multiple baseline part of it? Because it looks like you guys just primarily did an ABAB for each participant, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And why didn't you guys stagger that intervention and do the multiple baseline within it?
I think that it came more of like timing of things.
Okay.
And I think it was just kind of, we were into the study and then we would, I guess I can't really answer for everyone, but I think it was just more of like timing and how everything was going down with the study that we felt like doing an ABA design would be easier for us to actually execute and to like keep things on track.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes that could have been a downfall of having to try to do these embedded multiple baselines, because you're going to have to extend your baseline quite a bit for a few of the legs. Because how many participants did you guys have? 5?
Yeah.
Yes, and it was also
5.
hard during baseline stuff to have somebody else send the pictures.
Right.
So that also just kind of gets a little confusing. And I mean, we didn't really want to skew the data by having so many baselines. Find that one person, just send those pictures.
Yeah, well, I mean, an ABAB reversal should still be able to demonstrate experimental control. And so, yeah, I think just because of time constraints in itself, you would have had to keep some of the participants in baseline for quite some time, as you would have staggered your intervention across it. So it's fine with me if you guys did that. I just was curious for like why your reasoning was. And then did you guys calculate treatment integrity? Do you guys know how to do that?
I don't think
we did.
For your treatment integrity, you guys pointed out at one point like a few of the steps of how you provided the feedback to each other. But you also want to then develop like a checklist that had all the steps of your intervention on it, just to show that you can check off that those steps were completed. And so I'm not sure. I think
that's where we came in with having the additional participant receive the pictures as well, to ensure that the reinforcement was being delivered as well as the steps being received. So we kind of, I guess, embedded it. I'm sorry, I wasn't really catching on to what you were asking, but we embedded that within sending the messages. And we also checked to verify that the steps were being recorded correctly by doing the email chain with the experimenter at the end of each treatment phase, to send the amount of steps just to check and verify that they were accurately recorded for the steps and the numbers that were being placed on the graph.
Okay. Yeah. So you guys, you had that same person do the IOA as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so just well, I don't know if you've submitted the paper yet, but a lot of times what you'll do a separate IOA calculation, which is going to be comparing what the what they send and what's put into the Excel graph, but then also for the treatment integrity, you would just want to check off the steps that were part of the intervention itself, which would have been that there was a goal that was set, the self-monitoring piece, and then the which I think you guys can all pretty much calculate from the text messages that were sent back and forth. And so then that would just give you sort of, you'd be able to calculate a percentage of out of those steps that were to be completed as part of the intervention, how many of them actually were completed, to show that you had a high level of integrity.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that might be one thing you guys want to include.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Done it, and you can add it in and then send it to me if you want, or ask me any questions you have about that. Anything else? Oh, just one last comment. With any behavior analytic literature, you guys are going to see the sample sizes are usually going to be small. And B.F. Skinner said he would rather study one individual for 100 hours than 100 individuals for 1 hour, because you will learn a lot about variability in a specific participant's data too, and you can nicely, clearly demonstrate a functional relationship. But what is a downfall of having, a small sample is what you guys mentioned in terms of external validity. So you can't really generalize outside of the participants and the characteristics of the participants that you had with that small study. But you guys are probably going to, throughout your careers as behavior analysts, most of the intervention literature you're going to see will be using single subject designs with probably not many more than, a multiple baseline with 3 participants. But that is a benefit in that what you also won't see are like statistics and group averages, because what you'll see in several of those studies that you guys used as supporting literature is that you'll have 100 and some participants, but all their data are going to be averaged together. And so some of those participants are going to have responded really, really well to the intervention, and other ones are not going to have responded very much past their baseline levels. And so one criticism that behavior analysts will give to those who will just average group data is that data won't tell you about any specific individual. And so it's one benefit of single subject designs that you can really track an individual over time and see the clear effects of an intervention on their behavior, and see if their behavior is also stable over time. So although you're going to run into that with having small samples, a lot of behavior analysts would still prefer it over than using like average data of larger samples. But I think that
That's
was
interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to just mention that. And then I think that was pretty much it. Anything else that you guys think might have made the study a little bit more effective in terms of reinforcement? You guys had verbal praise alone, but what do you think?
Yeah. Well, as the experimenter, I definitely felt like as I was giving them feedback, I kind of throughout the whole process was even helping them, because as we see so much in the field that, reinforcement varies just as much as all of our participants. And so I think it would have been helpful to know what kind of feedback works for each participant. Do you get whether or not they like, the hard and fast, here's what your numbers are, they're too low, you need to step it up, or if they work better with more, loving and encouraging words, and even just to that, and not even just words, but would there have been a more tangible form of reinforcement that they could have received, because not even everyone responds to verbal praise in and of itself. So I definitely did think about, whether or not my feedback was going to be effective.
And kind of going off that, I think that, maybe doing a preference assessment, like even just a written one, just kind of us writing down what we like do we like verbal praise, do we like tangibles, would just kind of clarify that for the experimenter in order to give it to us.
I also think if I like set kind of my own goal, like something that I wanted to achieve or get at the end of it, it would have motivated me more. So if I would have like told myself, okay, if you increase your steps by 4,000 every single day by the end of this, you can go buy a new shirt. Like, I feel like I would have been more motivated to increase my steps to get that end prize,
right?
Call it like end gift.
Did you guys, were you guys the section where you were just watching another group that had a token system?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or their reinforcers, but the real problem with that is that they had to buy their own.
Right.
Yeah. If someone could send it to our house, that'd be great.
That's what I'm wondering. For all of you guys who were the participants in the study, what would have done it for you? What do you think would have made a huge difference in terms of like just an individualized reinforcer itself?
Like sending Chinese food to my house every day.
And you not having to pay for it,
for free.
Right.
I think for me, like working towards an end goal, like Alyssa mentioned, like, I don't know, maybe taking a weekend trip somewhere. Like that would have been great.
Okay. Anything else? Same here as what you said?
Yeah, a weekend trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we also could have done something. I mean, obviously we couldn't because the study wasn't like this, but we could have like each had like a paired up with a person, and if your partner reached their goal, then like you had to like send them a candy bar or like something, like you like got something else from your partner like as a surprise. Like it doesn't obviously, I mean, if we had endless money, it could be something great and big, but
right.
Not always.
I agree. I feel like if possible, if we could have done some sort of competition amongst the group and, you know, tried to have not a clear winner, but, you know, somebody to motivate you to do better. You know, if I'm just competing with myself, then it is what it is for that day. And, you know, oh, I didn't do as well as yesterday, but, you know, I'll try harder the next day. But if you're within your group and trying to at least match their steps or, you know, keep working towards a higher goal with them, I think that would be more motivating for me. And then, like Alyssa said, at the end, you know, that person with most steps gets something from everybody else that they don't have to pay for, something like that.
Okay. Anybody else? I'm surprised you guys didn't say money. That's what everybody was saying.
That's so true.
That would have been nice.
I guess I was trying to think realistically. I wasn't thinking,
what can I get?
Oh, good. Yeah, you know, it's good to be realistic. Okay. So anyway, that was a great presentation, guys. Thank you very much. And I appreciate you guys thinking about all the questions I sort of posed afterwards. I think this is a tricky study to replicate, and I'm curious to see how successful some of the other groups are going to be, because I think you guys have really like discussed a number of some of the limitations to it. And I apologize for having I didn't realize my camera was off when I was talking earlier, but yeah, nice work. And if you have any questions about the paper, you guys can email me. And if you want to make any sort of modifications based on, you know, some of the feedback I might have just given you, that's fine too. And then just make sure that you upload this on the due date for the discussion board. Each of you should still be giving 3 posts, but you can